So what the brain's trying to do is conserve energy, recognise these common patterns. What it's not doing is saying this is good, bad or indifferent. It's just going, it is what it is. It's us that have to step in and go, well, hang on a minute, that don't feel right.
The question is from Thinking Focus.
Hi, I'm Ricky.
Hi, I'm Rich.
This is the second podcast in a series that's exploring common thinking errors. Now, we all have these from time to time, Rich. They're perfectly normal.
Yep.
Most of us have these mistakes going on in our thinking, but actually it all turns out fine.
Yeah.
However, there are times when these thinking errors can get in our way, cause us to be unsuccessful, or even cause us harm. And in today's podcast, we're talking about overgeneralisation. So, Rich, the question is, what is the risk when we overgeneralise?
Okay, so maybe let's just try and, before we get into a bit more of that, work out and talk about a little bit about what overgeneralisation is. What do we mean? That'd be fair enough. That'd be a good start.
Absolutely.
So it's again, as you described, it's a shortcut that we use, that our brain uses, that often means that we make broad conclusions from a simple piece of information or a single event. So it could be, for example, you might say, she was late for the meeting, therefore she's disrespectful. Or something like, a politician lies, so all of them are bad. So we've got one piece of evidence.
Isn't that true, though?
well, I think there's been times when that's been proven, but
let's not pull at that through.
But actually, it's a good point. But it doesn't mean all of them are, does it? Now you might jokingly go, well, most of them are, but it doesn't mean all of them are. So you see the point in there, don't you? That actually there's one event or one thing, and what we do is we then make a broad sweeping statement across a whole sector of industry or a bunch of people or whatever, using just one single piece of information or event.
And I imagine that plays out both, because it sounds to me a bit like the halo effect and the horn effect. So, the halo effect, that if somebody does something well, then they must be good at everything.
That's it, yeah.
And also the horn effect, when somebody does something wrong or something poorly, then they're no good at anything.
Yeah, that's right.
And we're really good at placing those kind of labels on people, aren't we, in terms of...
Yeah, on other people, on ourselves, on the world in general. There's another daft example. I'm just trying to think about recent sporting history, but I suppose if you go back through what would be 1990s, wouldn't it? England, we always lose on penalties.
Yeah.
At football. That's an overgeneralisation. Now, you might... Actually, a team could do that. They could actually lose 3 or 4 on penalties but win 1. But then we say we always do. You create a self-fulfilling prophecy that you live into and a set of beliefs that then start to say that is true, even though the evidence might say it's not entirely true. So, yeah, you could. So it's not just something that we do about other people. We do it about ourselves. I had one bad sales call. I'm no good at sales. I can't do it, for example. So we do it to ourselves. We do it about other people. We do it about the world at large.
Well, it's like we say we're no good at penalties as a nation, the England team, whereas the Germans must be going, we're brilliant at them. Because they always seem to win, don't they?
And actually, that's an interesting point as well, because these things are not always a negative. So you could overgeneralise and say, I performed well in that meeting. I think I'm brilliant. I don't need to prepare for the next one. So that is also a thinking error. You've done it sort of positively and you think, well, actually, that's a good, confident thing to think. But that thinking error could lead to mistakes in the future because you haven't done the due diligence that you might do prior to a meeting.
Yeah,
so it's not always a negative.
It was the process that got you to be good in that meeting. You didn't just happen to be magically gifted in that particular meeting and therefore... Because, even world-class musicians, they don't just turn up and give a performance of their lives. They have a process that they go through, lots and lots of purposeful practice that they do in order
to be able to deliver.
To do their art form when it matters.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. So help us think about this in context of perhaps work. So you've talked about perhaps, showing up at a meeting and that going well and therefore that might lead us to. What other examples might we see in workplace?
Well, you could see lots actually. You know, I think about some from examples I've experienced where maybe a senior leader, a chief executive asks a question to one of their direct reports. They don't have the answer. Maybe they try and fudge the answer a little bit. Chief executive thinks you don't know what you're talking about, therefore you're no good.
Yeah.
And then goes deep diving into their work, into their team, into their organisation, finds 1 or 2 things that maybe are not right, but are absolutely not out of the ordinary, but makes an assumption that they're no good, and has then used another thinking error and labelled them of this person's not good enough.
Well, that's interesting. If you remember, we have a shared past.
Yeah.
That if our boss at the time would find an issue, say in the CRM system, then automatically
everything was wrong.
Everything was wrong. It's a little bit like the podcast that I recorded in podcast 1 with Paul, which was all or nothing. So all of a sudden,
very similar,
the generalising that everything therefore is wrong and that everybody is failing at this, as opposed to actually, is it that one example? Is it a percentage of things?
Yeah.
Or is it,
With all these things, there's often, we'll talk about other thinking errors in the series, but one of the things that helps us is to ask, where is the evidence that goes beyond this single event? That says actually everything is wrong. That person always doesn't fill in the CRM system. Where is the actual evidence, or is it a single point of data, a single, event?
Yeah, and I think it's the language that can catch us out here by using things like always.
Yep.
Every time. My wife, she gets killed in these podcasts. I hope she don't listen to them.
I hope she don't for your sake.
For my sake, absolutely. But she'll say, I've got millions of things to do.
Yeah.
And then my question is, millions? Which, of course, is not helpful. As opposed
Probably not at that moment.
As opposed to asking, how might I be of assistance, dear?
One of the other things to think about with thinking errors, and it's a general comment about...
You're not overgeneralising, eh?
It's a general comment about all of them, is that they are often used as a pattern that the brain's trying to find when it thinks we need help. So something happens. What your brain looks to do then is go, right, do I have a pattern to run of how to behave when this happens? So it reaches for a pattern. It gives you the pattern, the program, if you like. You run that program. So actually when your lovely wife is busy and she's got millions of things to do, it's handed her a pattern that says, I've got a lot on, how do I cope? What I do is I talk about how busy I am, and she's running a pattern of behaviour. Whereas in reality, she's probably got 2 or 3 things that are on her mind that she needs to cope with. But thinking errors are not coming from a place of rationalisation. They're coming from an irrational, often emotional place that causes not to take a pattern from the brain that's rational and helpful and helps us step back and say, well, where's the evidence? How have I coped with this before? Might I have missed some facts? We're not in a rational place, so we're not doing that.
And I imagine that these patterns, these little program runs, these are our brain learning to cope with the complexity of life. So, because if we had to think in that way about every single thing, we would probably be exhausted by probably 8 o'clock in the morning because we've had to process everything. So what the brain's trying to do is conserve energy, recognise these common patterns, and the problem is what it's not doing is saying this is good, bad or indifferent. It's just going, it is what it is. It's us that have to step in and go, well, hang on a minute, that don't feel right.
Yeah, that's so it doesn't. Your brain is just giving you a pattern. It doesn't know whether it's helpful or not.
And in the most cases, we get away with it, don't we? They're low-cost errors. So
in most cases. But, I mean, you can often see, if you go back to a risk, I think the question was that you asked, one of the risks when we overgeneralise is if we're doing it negatively, she's late for the meeting, therefore she's useless and not to be trusted. He's not filled his CRM system in, therefore he's a waste of time. He can't be part of the sales team, whatever. Those overgeneralizations, the risk with that is obviously that we're not thinking clearly. The risk with that is that we're making very broad assumptions about lots of situations that actually could mean we could upset other people, we could upset ourselves, we could actually get rid of good people out of the team that are doing good work. They just made a mistake. So there's lots and lots of risks attached. So those patterns that we're trying to run, if we can step back from them and talk to other people, and talking to other people is often a really good thing to help with thinking errors, because we're feeling emotional about something and someone else can come along and be a bit more rational and general in the way that they ask questions of us, can actually cause us to stop and think again, which causes us sometimes to realise maybe I didn't get that right.
Okay. So why should we care about this then on a day-to-day basis at work? Why should we be thinking in essence, particularly about some of these thinking errors? Well, from a practical sense, day-to-day, thinking about the audience that we have.
Well, I guess what we just said there, that the risks attached are that we're going to make mistakes, which could be emotional mistakes, because we feel unhappy about something. And let's be honest, we all do this because we're emotional creatures, aren't we? So we all do this. So the risks, I suppose, and why should we care about it, is because we could make mistakes that could cost us time, could cost us money, could damage relationships. The challenge, I suppose, is that you're not always aware that you're doing it. You're not always aware. We all do it.
Well, considering we automate a lot of our thinking.
So we all do it. So I suppose looking out for our language when we say things like they always, I always, it always, might be an indicator that, okay, am I overgeneralising here? Am I looking at the data? What facts have I got that back up this? Is there some evidence to show that what I'm thinking is correct?
I suppose what you're causing me to think about is, thinking back in some of the leadership roles that I've had where you've made decisions and you've thought it through, or you believe you've thought it through, I should say.
Yeah.
And then one of your team come up to you and go, why have you done that?
Yeah.
Which is probably a good question that you should be asked before you commit to the decision. It might be you've given a member of your team a particular opportunity and somebody else goes, well, why wasn't I offered that chance? And I might have made that decision based on the fact that they did some good work. I might reconcile that by saying they've earned it because they've done some good work. Or I might be going, well, if they did that, they could do this for me. Type leaps, which is me overgeneralising in terms of using halo effect in terms of that. So, when we were preparing for this, you were really keen to point out that often because we have a negative bias, humans are pre-programmed for negativity, we look for that because that's where the threat to us exists. Actually, we also need to be aware of perhaps some of the positivity and how that might lead us down decision-making patterns that might not be right, even though the intention is always the right intention.
So maybe it's a bit of a stretch, but if you think about the banking crisis that happened in 2008,
you're not going to blame me again for this.
yeah, no, you were partly to blame. I'm not going to say it was all your fault. That would be to overgeneralise. But if you think some of the things that happened, a lot of hubris was involved by those. So Fred Goodwin, RBS, all that kind of stuff. They'd got to a point, hadn't they, where they believed that everything that they did turned to gold. Every merger that they brought into the group turned to gold. Everything worked. And then they bought ABN AMRO, didn't they? And it was saddled with a load of debt. Bad debt.
And that was an ego trip.
But so what they'd done there is, when we talk about negative, positive, what they'd done there was believe that they're brilliant. Everything I do turns to gold, so they've overgeneralised.
So it'll be great.
It'll be great. Didn't do the due diligence, all hell breaks loose. So, yes, these are not always just, I didn't make a sale, therefore I'm not very good at sales. They're not always down on yourself. You can sometimes do it the other way, which causes you to make a thinking error because you haven't done the due diligence, you haven't thought things through. I guess the challenge with all of this is, we're all going to do it. You can know about it, but still do it. There's always, I think, a barometer or a dashboard, which is how do you feel? If you look at your feelings and you think, I'm feeling annoyed, I'm feeling upset, I'm feeling frustrated, whatever it might be, and I suppose with overgeneralising, if you're being negative about it, she was late, she's disrespectful. If you're feeling frustrated about something and that's going over and over in your head, that might be a clue that you need to stop, step back, talk to someone else, or examine your thinking in more detail to say, where's my logic, where's my evidence that backs up my argument?
And that's interesting, because that kind of leads us nicely on to my next question, which was all about, so what can we do about this? So you've kind of started that theme by going, you've got to notice your feelings. Because if you're in a sense of animation, let's say, which is all those emotions you described, then perhaps there's a pause and either reflect if there's nobody around, or we're going to involve somebody else around that.
Yeah.
So what else can we do?
I think other stuff that you can do is again, journaling is always really good. Write down what you're thinking, because in the process of writing it down, you can move from emotional to rational, irrational to rational. So you write it down. Everything's going wrong. They're always letting me down. Your brain, your rational brain, listens to that when you're doing it and goes, everything? Is it all going wrong? And it starts to help you to process. So that's also, and again, that will come up many times in our series on thinking errors, that's something we can do. For example, you might have, if you're being a bit down on yourself, I always get it wrong, you might actually benefit from stepping back, journaling and writing down what's actually going well. What's going well, what we're grateful for, what did I learn? Things like that, which help you to step back and begin to get a sense of perspective and feel better about doing things. But again, I go back to the fact that we all do it. It's natural that we all do it for all the reasons that we've said. Your feelings your emotions are a key to it. If you're feeling frustrated with this one in particular, overgeneralising, that gives you a clue that maybe you need to step back and get some help from a mate just by talking something through, or maybe write some stuff down and ask yourself some questions about logic and evidence. What logic are you using that's got you to this conclusion? What evidence do you have that this is correct? And it's not always easy, that, and sometimes it will be painful, because you want to be right. I want to be right that actually I'm rubbish. I want to be right that you're disrespectful. I want to be right. And when you examine it and you step back from it, it can be uncomfortable, because you realise maybe that's not right. And maybe I need to think differently. And that would mean effort, wouldn't it? Thinking differently would mean effort, and it would mean change. And that's not always what we want to do.
Well, yeah. And like you say, admitting you've got it wrong isn't always the easiest thing for people to do either.
And I suppose finish off one last thing, which is, there's a concept called unconditional life acceptance, which kind of means, and does mean, life doesn't go to plan, does it? And we have to accept that it's a bumpy road, it's ups and it's downs. And if I can accept that life doesn't go to plan, that might mean that when she is late for a meeting, maybe her life didn't go to plan that day. I'd like her to be here, I'd prefer her to be on time, but she hasn't been. It doesn't mean she's a bad person, and it doesn't mean that everyone in that team, when they haven't filled the CRM in, it's a bad team. So if we can get ourselves to think about unconditional life acceptance, that there's ups and there's downs, it can make us a little more forgiving in how we view some of these things when they happen.
That's really useful. If we were to tie this together then, in terms of kind of packaging it nice and neatly, what we're really saying is, let's beware of wrapping all things into one thing and then calling it good, bad or indifferent. So somebody's late, therefore
they're disrespectful.
Yeah. Or they're not very good at what they do, whatever it might be.
Yeah, they can't be trusted. Or, I didn't handle that objection well from the customer. I can't work with them again. That sort of thing.
Yeah. So let's one thing doesn't define everything, is what we're saying.
Yeah, absolutely.
So if we were to give them three things, our audience, give three things that they could be thinking about. One is about,
I think, feelings. Notice your feelings.
Notice your feelings.
If your feelings frustrated, that's a key. Number 2 would be step back, talk to someone else, and through that point of reflection with someone else, you'll get to a place of, what logic am I using? What evidence is there for this to say this is true? And 3,
shit happens.
3 is shit happens. We have to accept that life doesn't always go to plan, and when we start to make a bit more peace with that, it enables us to feel a little bit more comfortable with these things.
Next time on The Question Is.
Well, I think from an individual point of view, it can be harmful if we live our life imagining that everything's going to go wrong all the time, or we get stuck in a loop over something. And I know I'm guilty of it. I know most of us are guilty of it. I know I do it over certain things. It's not pleasant. It's not pleasant because it causes you to feel stressed, discomfort. It can cause you to feel depressed.
To find out how Thinking Focus can unlock the potential within your organisation, go to www.thinkingfocus.com, where you'll discover more about the work we do, helping our clients increase productivity and enable change.